Part 2, Stories of Love and Adventure. 5 is Cupid and Psyche. And we have like some sort of towering, multi-floored castle, I guess, on top of a mountain, and someone else at another mountain standing in adoration. Some woman, perhaps casting a spell on it, or I don't know. So Cupid and Psyche. This story is only told by Apuleius, a Latin writer of the 2nd century of the Common Era. The Latin names of the entities are therefore used. It is a prettily told tale, after the manner of Ovid. The writer is entertained by what he writes. He believes none of it. Well, he puts it a certain way for a reason, though, right? There was once a king who had 3 daughters, all lovely maidens, but the youngest, Psyche, excelled her sisters so greatly that besides them she seemed a very goddess, consorting with mere mortals. The fame of her surpassing beauty spread over the earth, and everywhere men journeyed to gaze upon her with wonder and adoration, and to do her homage, as though she were in truth one of the immortals. They would even say that Venus herself could not equal this mortal, as they thronged in ever-growing numbers to worship her loveliness. No one any more gave a thought to Venus herself. Her temples were neglected. Her altars fell with cold ashes. Her favorite towns deserted and falling in ruins. All the honors once hers were now given to a mere girl destined someday to die. Now, I personally worship the god of beauty, but I don't gender or personify such. It may well be believed that this female entity would not put up with this treatment. As always, when she was in trouble, she turned for help to her son, that beautiful winged youth, whom some call Cupid, others love, against whose arrows there is no defense, neither in heaven nor on the earth. She told him her wrongs, and as always he was ready to do her bidding. Use your power, she said, and make the hussy fall madly in love with the vilest and most despicable creature there is in the whole world. And so, no doubt, he would have done if Venus had not first shown him Psyche, never thinking, in her jealous rage, what such beauty might do, even to the male entity of love himself. As he looked upon her, it was as if he had shot one of his arrows into his own heart. He said nothing to his mother. Indeed, he had no power to utter a word, and Venus left him with the happy confidence that he would swiftly bring about Psyche's ruin. Now, Al-Wadud, I do not mean by that a personified male entity of love, but what happened, however, was not what she had counted on. Psyche did not fall in love with a horrible wretch. She did not fall in love at all. Still more strange, no one fell in love with her. Men were content to look and wonder and worship, and then pass on to marry someone else. Both her sisters, inexpressibly inferior to her, were splendidly married, each to a king. Psyche, the all-beautiful, sat sad and solitary, only admired, never loved. It seemed that no man wanted her. This was, of course, most disturbing to her parents. Her father finally traveled to an oracle of Apollo to ask his advice on how to get her a good husband. The entity answered him, but his words were terrible. Cupid had told him the whole story and had begged for his help. Accordingly, Apollo said that Psyche, dressed in deepest mourning, must be set on the summit of a rocky hill and left alone, and that her destined husband, a fearful winged serpent stronger than the entities themselves, would come to her and make her his wife. The misery of all when Psyche's father brought back this lamentable news can be imagined. They dressed the maiden as though for her death, and carried her to the hill with greater sorrowing than if it had been to her tomb. But Psyche herself kept her courage. You should have wept for me before, she told them, because of the beauty that has lied drawn down upon me, the jealousy of heaven. Now go, knowing that I am glad the end has come. And they went in despairing grief, leaving the lovely, helpless creature to meet her doom alone, and they shut themselves in their palace to mourn all their days for her. On the high hilltop in the darkness, Psyche sat, waiting for she knew not what terror. There, as she wept and trembled, a soft breath of air came through the stillness to her, a gentle breathing of zephyr, sweetest and mildest of winds. She felt it lift her up. She was floating away from the rocky hill and down until she lay upon a grassy meadow, soft as a bed and fragrant with flowers. It was so peaceful there, all her trouble left her, and she slept. She woke beside a bright river, and on its bank was a mansion, stately and beautiful, as though built for a god, with pillars of gold and walls of silver and floors inlaid with precious stones. No sound was to be heard. The place seemed deserted, and Psyche drew near, awestruck at the sight of such splendor. As she hesitated on the threshold, voices sounded in her ear. She could see no one, but the words they spoke came clearly to her. The house was for her, they told her. She must enter without fear and bathe and refresh herself. Then a banquet table would be spread for her. We are your servants, the voices said, ready to do whatever you desire. The bath was most delightful, the food most delicious she had ever enjoyed. While she dined, sweet music breathed around her. A great choir seemed to sing a harp, but she could only hear, not see them. Throughout the day, except for the strange companionship of the voices, she was alone, but in some inexplicable way she felt sure that, with the coming of the night, her husband would be with her. And so it happened when she felt him beside her, and heard his voice softly murmuring in her ear. All her fears left her. She knew, without seeing him, that there was no monster or shape of terror, but the lovelier but the lover and husband she had longed and waited for. This half and half companionship could not fully content her. Still she was happy, and the time passed swiftly. One night, however, her dear, though unseen husband spoke gravely to her, and warned her that danger in the shape of her two sisters was approaching. They are coming to the hill where you disappeared, to weep for you, he said, but you must not let them see you, or you will bring great sorrow upon me and ruin to yourself. She promised him she would not, but all the next day she passed in weeping, thinking of her sisters and herself, unable to comfort them. She was still in tears when her husband came, and even his caresses could not check them. At last he yielded sorrowfully to her great desire. Do what you will, he said, but you are seeking your own destruction. Then he warned her solemnly not to be persuaded by anyone to try to see him, on pain of being separated from him forever. Psyche cried out that she would never do so. She would die 100 times over rather than live without him. But give me this joy, she said, to see my sisters. Sadly he promised her that it should be so. The next morning the two came, brought down from the mountain by Zephyr. Happy and excited, Psyche was waiting for them. It was long before the three could speak to each other. Their joy was too great to be expressed, except by tears and embraces. But when at last they entered the palace, and the elder sisters saw its surpassing treasures, when they sat at the rich banquet and heard the marvelous music, bitter envy took possession of them, and a devouring curiosity as to who was the lord of all this magnificence and their sister's husband. But Psyche kept faith. She told them only that he was a young man away now on a hunting expedition. Then, filling their hands with gold and jewels, she had Zephyr bear them back to the hill. They went willingly enough, but their hearts were on fire with jealousy. All their own wealth and good fortune seemed to them as nothing compared with Psyche's, and their envious anger so worked in them that they came finally to plotting on how to ruin her. Oh yeah, don't do crap like that to your family, or anyone that accomplish for yourself, or be glad that you have more than you need. But